Once upon a time, in a quiet little town nestled between rolling hills, stood an old clock on top of the town's tallest building, the town hall. The clock had been there for as long as anyone could remember, watching over the people below. Every hour, it would ring its loud, echoing chime, reminding everyone of the passing time. The clock was proud of its role in the town. It was reliable, always ticking along steadily, keeping perfect time. But as the years went by, things started to change. People began to rely more on their own watches, phones, and other gadgets to keep track of time. They stopped looking up at the clock, and no one paused to listen to its chime anymore. At first, the clock didn't mind. It knew it was still doing its job, and it kept ticking faithfully. But as time went on, the silence around the clock became more noticeable. It felt lonely. "I wish someone would look up at me again," the clock thought one day as it struck noon, its chime echoing into the empty square. "I miss being important." The buildings around the clock noticed its sadness. The old lampposts that lined the street below spoke up. "Hey, clock, don't worry," one lamppost said, flickering as it spoke. "We're all still here. We notice you." "But it's not the same," the clock sighed, its hands barely moving. "I used to help people every day, but now they don't need me." A nearby bench, weathered and worn from years of use, added in, "You're still important. You've been with the town for so long. Just because people don't look at you as much doesn't mean you don't matter." The clock appreciated their kind words, but it still felt sad. It wanted to feel needed again, to be part of people's lives. Days passed, and the clock continued to tick, though it seemed slower now, like time itself was dragging. One evening, a terrible storm rolled into the town. The wind howled, and rain lashed against the windows of the town hall. The power went out all across the town, plunging everything into darkness. Without their gadgets or lights, people were lost. They couldn't tell what time it was, and there was a growing sense of confusion. That's when someone in the town square looked up and saw the faint outline of the clock in the distance, still ticking, still keeping time. "Look," the person shouted to their friends. "The clock is still working." Suddenly, more and more people gathered in the square, staring up at the old clock. It was the only thing in the town that could tell them the time. The clock noticed the crowd and felt a surge of pride. It hadn't been forgotten after all. For the next few days, until the power came back on, the entire town relied on the old clock again. People gathered around it each hour, listening for its chime, knowing that it was their guide in the storm. When the power finally returned, people didn't forget the clock. They realized how much they had taken it for granted, and from that day on, many people made it a habit to look up at the clock each time they passed through the square. The clock felt appreciated once again, and though it continued its steady ticking as always, it now did so with renewed energy, proud to be a part of the town's daily life once more. And so, the lonely old clock was lonely no more. Let's learn some words from the story. Chime. Meaning, a ringing sound, especially one made by a bell. Example, the church bells chime at noon, calling everyone to prayer. Weathered. Meaning, worn or altered in appearance by exposure to the weather. Example, the weathered fence was a reminder of the passage of time. Surge. Meaning, a sudden powerful forward or upward movement. Example, a surge of excitement ran through the audience when the concert began.